two.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to our weekly media briefing and public health update with Montgomery County Executive Marc Elrich. I'm Lorna Vigili, Hispanic Public Information Officer for Montgomery County Government, and joining us today is Dr. Nina Ashworth, Chief of Public Health Services, Mr. Sean O'Donnell, Deputy Chief of Public Health Services, Dr. James Bridgers, Director, Department of Health and Human Services, as well as Dr. Earl Strotter, Assistant Chief Administrative Officer. Joining us today from county government, it's Director Chris Conkling from Montgomery County Department of Transportation. And our special guest this afternoon, it's Maryland Delegate Julie Palakovich-Carr, who is the chair of the Montgomery County House of Delegates delegation. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Good afternoon, Mr. County Executive from Annapolis.
Good afternoon from Annapolis. They have snow here, too, in case anybody's wondering. So we're all in the same situation. I'm glad to be here today, and it's the first day of session, and I was pleased that our county's House Delegation Chair, Julie Palakovich-Carr, is able to join us this afternoon and take a few minutes on this busy day. The state's facing an unprecedented budget deficit of nearly $3 billion, which requires immediate attention to protect Maryland's AAA bond rating. But frankly, more important than that is in order to maintain the kind of services and programs that the state needs to be successful. AAA bond ratings are great. What you do with your bond rating and your money is really the important thing I think that people look to. The stakes really couldn't be higher, and the decisions made this session could impact every jurisdiction in Maryland, including Montgomery County. For Montgomery County, this means for us continuing to prioritize key investments that are crucial to our economic growth and sustainability. Projects like bus rapid transit, keeping WMATA functioning, our Institute of Health Computing, keeping that growing. These are all essential, not just for our region, but for the entire state. I also support the ongoing conversation about modernizing Maryland's transportation financing structure to ensure that it meets the needs of all regions equitably and effectively. For the state to turn this budget around, we must create more jobs. And in fact, you need to create more jobs if you expect to see more housing. These two things are directly tied to each other, and you cannot have an effective housing policy without having an effective jobs policy, because people go where the jobs are. They don't move to housing if there aren't jobs there. So our challenge is to combine an effort to grow the job base in the state and county, as then make sure that our housing comes along with it. The tried and true way of doing this has been to provide transportation infrastructure as well as high quality education and workforce and a good training environment. Then the last things, the things this county does really well. It's the transportation infrastructure we're really lacking. We learned that from the Amazon bid process, and it's what I hear from nearly every company that I've met with. And just to reinforce the Amazon bid process, the previous governor, in order to get Amazon, was going to do 3 bus rapid transit lines to serve the White Flint area where Amazon was going to land. So even they recognized back then the criticality of transportation to driving economic growth. States also focus on addressing the goals of the blueprint for Maryland's future while navigating the current physical realities. And it's clear the state doesn't have the physical capacity to stay on track to fund the full blueprint on the timeline that was anticipated. Whatever adjustments are made, the first thing probably ought to be to focus on those changes that would be the most impactful to students, rather than spreading a little bit of money over many, many objectives where the funding isn't adequate to achieve any of them. Nor can the costs of this be dumped on local governments who have their own increased financial burdens to deal with. Our school system is a good example of it. It has real challenges that have been ignored for too long, independent of the costs that come with Blueprint. The request from the school system is alone $300 million over last year. As a former school teacher, I'm aware that 3 of the most determining factors of a child's educational growth are what they're exposed to in terms of language, social skills, and numeracy, as well as parental engagement and teacher engagement. Many classes require lower student-to-teacher ratios. Unfortunately, nationally and here in Maryland, we continue to face consistent teacher shortages, which in no small part are driven by low pay and a lack of classroom supports. My initial impression is that this school system now is taking this seriously, focusing on things that are most impactful in the classroom, trimming administration, and being cognizant that they need to get their healthcare costs under control. And I give the superintendent a lot of credit for the bluntness and honesty in which he introduced his budget. It was refreshing to hear what was really needed and what the real challenges were. It's also challenging to meet it all, but at least we're starting from a basis of not pretending like everything is perfectly fine. This is a budget debate that's going to play out in Rockville and every other county seat in the state, as much as it's going to play out here in Annapolis. And although the budget, infrastructure, and education funding debate will dominate a lot of discussion here in Annapolis, there's still lots of other priorities and issues that we'll be advocating for. The one thing I've learned about working with the General Assembly over the years I've been in Maryland politics is that persistence is a good thing. There are several issues we'll continue working on with the state, such as dealing with reckless driving, prescription drug costs, and policies that will create more affordable housing. And in this regard, we're particularly interested in creating more ownership opportunities for anybody who's a housing geek out there and knows a little bit about how state and frankly federal resources work. It's very possible to find money to support rental housing, but getting money to support the construction of ownership housing is much more difficult. And we really don't have the programs to do that. And that's a place we think the state could make some progress. On the economic development front, we've shared our experiences in trying to attract some major companies to the county and the lack of state incentives that match what can be found elsewhere. And where we failed most in the county is building of a transit system that we need to convince companies that we can take the infrastructure we show on paper and actually bring it to light. Virginia is a poster child just next door to us for how to do this, and we've ignored what they've been doing for far too long. As always, I appreciate the partnership we share with the Montgomery County delegation, Governor Moore's administration, and the General Assembly. I'm here in Annapolis to listen, learn, and offer my help in any ways that moves our common goals forward. Throughout this session, we'll be offering this forum to members of our state delegation, General Assembly members from other jurisdictions, as well as leaders in Governor Moore's administration and advocacy organizations to highlight bills and efforts going on here so that you have a sense of what's actually happening more so than you would get from the local media. What has been said is it's appropriate that our first media briefing guest in this session is our House Delegation Chair, Julie Polakovich-Carr. Beyond her responsibilities of leading the county's House Delegates delegation, Delegate Polakovich-Carr also serves on the Ways and Means and the Joint Audit and Evaluation Committees. I've enjoyed working with Julie on many key issues through the past sessions and look forward to doing the same this year. So, Delegate Carr, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Mr. County Executive. Thanks for having me on today. I appreciate this opportunity on our first day of the 90-day legislative session, just to give a little bit of a preview of what may happen during the 2025 legislative session and what the Montgomery County House Delegation is, has on our radar for this legislative session. So normally opening day of session really is a day of optimism and excitement, and colleagues are happy to see each other again after many months apart and being back at home working on behalf of our constituents. And I'll say definitely have all of those feelings today, but this year feels different. And I think a lot of my colleagues are saying that as well, just because of the big financial challenges, as the county executive mentioned, that we know are on the horizon and really do need to be dealt with this legislative session, from the nearly $3 billion budget shortfall for our state's general fund and making sure that we can continue to provide essential and safety net programs for our residents in terms of lack of funding for transportation infrastructure projects. Again, not a new issue this year, but we want to make sure that we continue to have those dollars to keep up with maintenance of our roads and our bridges and our public transportation mass transit systems, as well as looking ahead to new opportunities in mass transit, including the county's bus rapid transit system. And then just looking a couple of years ahead, we know that we're going to start to see a shortfall for public education in terms of continuing implementation of the Blueprint for Maryland's Future, which is a really key program. And we're still in early days of it, but starting to see the successes. And we don't want to cut the legs out from underneath the successes we're seeing in our public schools across the state. So clearly a lot to handle this session. I think all around within the delegation, we really do feel like the financial challenges are top of mind for everyone and really the most pressing thing that we need to work on this session. With the governor's budget anticipated next week, I think we're all waiting to see the details in that, but really are hopeful that we can make good progress this session to protect those programs and investments that we know that Montgomery County residents and residents across the state really value. A little more parochially, wearing my hat as delegation chair, I'll say our big focus is making sure that in whatever revenue solutions we come up with this session, that there isn't a disproportionate impact to Montgomery County, and also making sure that we are defending our priorities. I mentioned bus rapid transit earlier. That has been a great partnership with the county executive and with the county and our delegation to bring in new funding for the planning and hopefully at some point construction of more BRT lines throughout the county. And we hope to continue to make progress on that front. But we're going to just keep working there to make sure that we are not losing out on the gains that we've made to date for that and other programs. So with that, I'm happy to turn back over to you, Mr. County Executive, to take questions.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Delegate Carr. Thank you, Mr. County Executive. Members of the media, if you have any questions for the delegate this afternoon, please raise your hands and we'll call on you. Any questions regarding the 2025 legislative session in Annapolis? Scott Broom, WSA 9. Good afternoon, Scott.
Hey, good afternoon. I didn't mean to raise hand too early because I'm not that focused on Annapolis today. I drew the school card today, Mr. County Executive. I'm out in Albany looking at school cleanups. Schools say they're going to make an announcement here perhaps later today about tomorrow. Could you share any reflections on the situation with storm cleanup and schools at this time?
Scott, I think we're going to talk about other topics after we're done with the delegate because she needs to depart. So we'll address her topic first.
I'll stand aside. My apologies.
Okay, no problem. Judy Hurst, the Greater Olney News. Good afternoon, Judy. Do you have any questions for the delegate?
I do. Thank you so much. Hi, Julie. Just wondering, I've been around a long time and there was never a secret that Montgomery County was the pocketbook for the rest of the state. Has that gotten better? You said that you want to make sure that it's not disproportionate, but has it gotten better over the years?
Hi, Judy. Great to hear your voice. That is something that we have to be very mindful of in Annapolis because I think, unfortunately, there is still a perception about Montgomery County and our wealth, maybe relative to other parts of the state. I would say members of the delegation, we have been very strategic for a number of years now in really trying to educate our colleagues about what Montgomery County really is like in terms of the diversity of our residents. And when we, just look at the facts on the ground in terms of the number of students who attend our public schools, who are on free or reduced price meals, reflection of poverty, really providing that information and doing, an informal education campaign amongst our colleagues. So I'm hoping that multi-year effort will pay some dividends this year. But I would say we always face a headwind in that regard.
Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Members of the media, any more questions for the delegate this afternoon? No more questions? Going once, twice? Delegate Carr, thank you so much for joining us. We know that you need to depart this media briefing. And again, thank you for being here. Stay safe and have a great session.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you taking some time today.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. County Executive, back to you.
Meanwhile, back in Montgomery County. So I want to talk a little bit about winter storm operations update. First, I want to applaud the massive effort undertaken in response to our biggest winter storm in years. And our planning started long before the first snowflakes fell, but the work went into overdrive starting on Sunday. And today, the county extended the cold emergency alert we're under through Friday at 1 p.m. Residents should be prepared for dangerously cold weathers with wind chill values below 20 degrees. These dangerously cold temperatures and wind chills could cause frostbite on exposed skin within 30 minutes, or they can cause hypothermia. While I go through some of our work and warnings that still apply, I want to share some of the images and information shared through our social media channels over the past few days. We've tried to give people a sense of what we've got out there, how many people, how many hours of service these folks have been doing, how many lanes that have been, primary lanes that have been cleared, and how much of the residential mileage has been cleared this is as of Monday of 9 p.m. So some of the numbers would be updated today. Over 650 road crews worked over 2 consecutive days to remove snow and ice from the 1,660 primary roads and more than 3,600 miles of residential roads. This was a 2-tiered storm with more attention needed on primary roads than initially we believed. And department leaders coordinated with our Storm Operations Center to handle the incidents that developed, like water main breaks and road closures. And our county was also worked to keep people without housing out of the cold. Our shelters were at capacity, but in some locations, because of the storm, extra accommodations were made to ensure safety. The county's 311 call center was open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday to answer your questions. The most frequent question we got was about the storm's impact on our trash and recycling pickup schedules. Another common question was whether or not county buildings were open or closed. The snow shut down the government Monday, but every building was back open on Tuesday. We kept our buses running throughout the storm. I want to thank all the county employees who braved the bitter cold and icy roads to serve the public this week. While snow day is often fun for kids and those who get the day off from work, our entire government, it's multiple days. For our entire government, it was multiple days and long hours of very difficult and often dangerous work. Our snow operations started last week and extended through the weekend and will continue through the week as we recover from this storm and prepare for what may be hitting us again this Saturday. I'm not a weather forecaster. This looks like it's a likely event, but we've seen these things evaporate before, so we'll see what happens as we get closer. And while it's easy to see our first responders and Department of Transportation employees out in weather conditions helping our residents and motorists be safe, many other departments, from our 311 operators to regional service centers to our county public information officers and council members, were busy taking questions, dealing with issues, and putting out proactive communications. I also want to thank our partners at MDOT, the State Police, and Maryland Department of Emergency Management, as well as the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments and the National Weather Service for their collaborative efforts. On Monday, we also worked closely with WSSV as we had a significant water main break in downtown Bethesda in the midst of the snowstorm. WSSV moved quickly to get the significant pipe damage repaired as quickly as possible, and I don't expect that this is going to be the last winter water main break that we're going to see in the county. According to information received from WSSC, they track the Potomac River temperature along with water main breaks and leaks. When the temperature hits its new low for the season, such as this week, they typically see an increase in water main breaks a few days later. Older pipes are shocked. It's not like emotionally shocked, but shocked in a physical sense by the cold water and causing them to break. Approximately 40% of the water mains in the WSCC water system are more than 50 years old. The pipe on Wisconsin Avenue was originally installed in 1932. It's approximately 93 years old. Another example of the infrastructure investment needs that we need to tend to year after year. I want to thank everyone, including the media, for our snow update media briefing on Monday. It was very quick and an efficient way for us to have all of our relevant leaders on, and we'd likely utilize this format for any forthcoming storms this winter. I want to remind everyone that libraries, senior centers, and recreation centers are open during normal hours as a place to stay warm. And let's hope we're done with the bitter cold soon. I'd like to stop now and allow County Department of Transportation Director Chris Conklin to provide any further updates and talk about how we're preparing for another potential round of snow this weekend.
Good afternoon, County Executive. Thank you for the opportunity. Our crews have stayed mobilized since Sunday. As the County Executive reported, we are now out addressing areas where residents have identified locations where additional snow removal is needed. Many of those locations are within our residential neighborhoods. We are dealing with persistent snowpack on some roads. We have changed our plow tips to be steel tipped again. As you may recall from previous briefings, we have used rubber tip plows to reduce damage to concrete pavement markings and the pavement during snow operations. But there are some areas that we are going back and addressing with steel tip plows to remove any persistent snowpack that is on those streets. We are also coordinating closely with our colleagues at Montgomery County Public Schools so that they can notify us of specific locations of concern for them so that we can have those addressed before a potential school opening tomorrow. And we continue to field any requests that come through 311, which is the best way to get that information to us in the most timely manner. And that information goes directly to our snow removal crews. I do want to thank the roughly 600 people who worked many straight hours on this. We now have about 250 people still working to address those longer term problematic issues. In terms of preparing for Saturday, we're monitoring the weather. At this point, we are continuing to see persistent cold, which is a challenge in snow removal. We usually rely significantly on sunlight and warmth in addition to salt and plows to remove the snow conditions, but we're relying mostly on salt and plows this week because the sun and warmth just hasn't been there and it doesn't look like it will be there through Saturday. What we're seeing for the forecast now is a small amount of accumulation, but given the persistent cold, that accumulation will likely quickly cover roads again, and we will be back out treating those events as they occur. So thank you for the opportunity, and if there are other specific questions, I'm happy to address those.
Thank you. Mr. County Executive, would you like to take questions regarding removal
Yeah,
operations?
I don't want to make Scott have to wait any longer.
All righty, that's what I thought. Thank you very much. Can we take questions now? Scott, thank you for your patience. Are you still here with us? I think he dropped. He might have dropped the call. I don't see him here. Members of the media, any questions regarding snow removal operations? Oh, there's Kevin Dupre, DC News Now. Good afternoon.
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon. Had a quick question for Mr. Conklin in regards to snow removal. I was out in Bethesda at Norwood Drive and Stratford Road. I don't know if you have the specific details on hand, but do you know if those were one of a list of this on the list of streets that you all will go and kind of re-go over again with salt and then the plows as well? It's still pretty icy out there.
I don't have the specific list in front of me. They're being compiled by our various depots to respond to. But if there are areas that have, inch thick plus snowpack, those are the locations that we're going to be revisiting. If the road is white or lightly covered, we anticipate that the salt will do its job.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any more weather-related snow operations questions at this time? Okay, Mr. County Executive, I think we can move forward with other topics.
So we're going to talk a little bit more about winter storms, and we're going to talk about the sustainable use of salt. Salt has traditionally been used as long as I can remember to help melt snow, but salt brings with it some serious environmental consequences. So for a number of years, there's been an effort regionally to reduce the amount of salt that people use. And as we clean up from this snowstorm, I wanted to highlight the collaboration between our Department of Environmental Protection and WSSC Water on the SaltWise campaign. We've encouraged all the departments to adopt sustainable use practices to protect water quality and the environment. And for example, our Department of Transportation monitors road temperatures to limit the use of salt brine that applies to roads. Excessive salt used to de-ice pavement and asphalt can damage our infrastructure and threaten public health. And WSSC warns that rising salt levels in rivers cannot be filtered, posing risks to residents, particularly those on sodium-restricted diets. So by being careful with salt use, everybody can help reduce salt runoff into the drinking waters like the Potomac and Patuxent rivers. To be salt-wise means that, first of all, shovel early in the storm and often to prevent ice buildup. You may shovel more times during the day, but you'll have less of a burden shoveling if you do it this way. Be a lot quicker. Also, limit the amount of salt used to 1.5 cups, about 12 ounces of salt per 10 sidewalk squares. And that's enough to keep those 10 squares melting and prevent an ice buildup. And that's the equivalent of a 20-foot driveway. Sweep and reuse excess salt after the ice is gone. You can actually reuse this stuff. So if you see piles of salt sitting on your driveway or on your sidewalk, you can actually sweep it up, put it back into a container, and dump it back out the next time a storm comes around. So you don't have to be done with it. You don't have to figure out where you're going to lose it. Just put it back into a container and be ready the next time you need salt. And that way you don't have to buy more salt. Excessive salt use can be reported by calling 311. Keep our community and environment in mind this winter as we work together to safeguard our collective resources. Finally, I just want to talk about, I saw yesterday that County Council Vice President Will Jawando called out the Attainable Housing Strategies Initiative that was put forward by the council to consider by Park and Planning last summer. It's been the subject of multiple community meetings throughout the fall. And in Councilmember Jawanda's statement, he suggested putting recommendations from this plan on hold indefinitely. And I agree with his idea and the main reason behind it. As I've said repeatedly since the Attainable Housing Plan was shared publicly, it does not address our most pressing need, which is affordable housing. Spending time and resources on any housing plan that doesn't add to, protect, or preserve our affordable housing stock does not help us address our goals. And as Councilmember Jawanda said, stable and affordable housing is a critical issue for individuals and families that cannot wait. The community was asked for feedback on the Attainable Housing Plan, and their overwhelming disapproval should be taken seriously. It is still, in my mind, baffling why the council would proceed with something that wasn't asked for by the community, that was be imposed on the community, when no one in the community came in and said, we want you to tear up our neighborhoods and build a different housing type. Normally and historically, our plans have been done in conjunction with residents. Both Thrive and this plan were done pretty much ignoring residents. And that's one of the problems when you don't want to talk to residents, you don't engage them in it, you wind up with plans that don't reflect what the community wants. And as somebody who actually served on a master plan committee under Doug Duncan, I saw the real value in bringing people together to discuss the shape of development in order to make sure that everybody's needs were met. And it's just alarming that you even have planning board members who don't think that developers should even talk to residents. They should only deal with the planning board. There's supposed to be citizen representatives on the planning board. And if they don't want the developers to talk to citizens, it's a real question about, whether any citizen can feel like their concerns would even be heard if they got in front of planning board members who think like this. This proposal upzones up to 82% of single-family homes in the county. This is an enormous change, and residents must be a serious part of the conversation. I want to point out that this was all generated by a report from the Council of Governments that said that Montgomery County had to build 10,000 more housing units by 2030 than were originally in the forecast. And I'm saying forecast because that's the number of units that COG thought would be needed by 2030. And they said they made a mistake and they needed 10,000 more. COG also provided the planning boards, including ours, and presented at a meeting where our planning board was present and told them they did not need to rezone anything in our master plans in order to provide this housing, because our master plans, which cover the entire county, have enough density in them to handle the growth in the amount of housing needed. The COG went as far as to saying that our plans today can handle not only the 75,000 additional units coming to the region, which is all the counties around DC, it can handle the 100,000 units, which is 25,000 more that were projected to land here by 2045. In other words, we already have the zone capacity to do this. There was no reason to do what park and planning set off to do. But they've used this as an excuse to change a housing they don't like, which is single family homes, and have manufactured the degree of crisis that doesn't actually exist. And I'll just end on this part of the conversation by pointing out there are over 30,000 units that are already approved, already waiting to be built, that all a developer has to do is come and pull a building permit. They don't even have to get any approvals. These are things they've asked to develop. They've got plans for it. They've been in front of the planning board. All they've got to do is pull building permits. And if those aren't being built in the face of a housing crisis, then something's wrong. And I'll just add parenthetically, this is a jobs problem. If we had the jobs in the county, we would see demand for housing and these units would get built. The idea that people are going to build units without jobs in the county, without new jobs in the county coming here, is just delusional. I want to thank Councilmember Jawanda for his common sense. I'm hopeful that his colleagues will also step back from the planning board's proposal and have honest and meaningful conversations with residents all over the county. Residents on the eastern side of the county and the western side are very clear that they have serious concerns. We need a planning process that makes our current residents central in shaping planning and changes in the county. We have over 1 million people who've chosen to live here, and to disregard what people wanted in coming to Montgomery County, and a couple of people on a board saying, we think we're going to do it differently, is not the way you do planning, and it's certainly not the way you involve the community. I'd also like to give my health team and other county leaders an opportunity to share updates before we open it up to your questions. So, health team, it's all yours.
No updates. I'll turn it over to Sean O'Donnell. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a reminder that our respiratory disease season is still ongoing. We are seeing more patients in our hospitals with COVID, although this year it is a much lower level than we've seen in previous years. So again, this is respiratory season. Please be careful. And if you have symptoms, please wear a mask if you need to go out or be around other people.
Thank you, Mr. County Executive. Just two things from the HHS overall response to those who may be in need of emergency sheltering or some accommodations should there be a crisis as a result of the extreme or severe weather. I remind folks to contact our crisis helpline at 240-777-4000, 240-777-4000. And for those individuals who are in need of homeless resources, they can contact 240-907-2688.
Thank you, Dr. Stoddard. Do you have any comments?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, reiterate what Director Conklin and County Executive alluded to. I want to thank the responders that we had out from across our public safety, our Department of Transportation, Department of General Services, Health and Human Services out over the last 72 hours, really, both preparing for and responding to the snowstorm. I also want to take a moment and really say that our thoughts are with those out in California. The situation there is obviously pretty horrific. We have not received any requests for support from California, but obviously, just like we have in other situations across the country, should such a request come in, obviously Montgomery County would be very willing to come in and support either the response and or recovery to what is a horrific national disaster. And obviously, our thoughts are with those who are suffering, and frankly, our thoughts are also with those who are actively responding to that event.
Thank you, Dr. Stoddard. Members of the media, do you have any questions for the county executive and the officials this afternoon? In the meantime, Mr. County Executive, do you remember the question from Scott Room, WUSA 9? Because they're actually here on the call recording. He might have had to drop off.
Scott asked if we knew what happened with the schools, and the issue with the schools was, and I don't know how this happened, but they were not able to get the school sites cleared. So obviously, teachers and students have to be able to come and park. The buses need to be able to park and move around. And for whatever reason, they weren't able to get enough of the schools cleared to make that possible. That's what I believe. And if Chris is still on the call, he could correct me. But that was the last thing I heard.
I'm here. We've been actively discussing with schools the status of the county road network to help them make decisions about whether they believe they can open tomorrow or not. The county road network is largely clear. Again, as I mentioned earlier, there may be small locations, specific areas where we need to do some additional treatment. We've coordinated with schools and asked them to give us information about any locations of concern that they have for us to address, and expect that we could address any of those locations during the overnight hours so that schools could open. I don't know a lot about schools' own ability of their own sites or their buses to travel, but clearly they have a lot of property to manage and a lot of buses to make sure it can move safely. So I'm sure they're looking at the combination of all those factors.
Thank you both.
One piece I would also add is another consideration the schools also do consider is the accessibility of bus stops throughout neighborhoods and things of that nature. So I do want to remind residents that we do have a requirement in Montgomery County that you're responsible for clearing your own private sidewalks, those in front of your home. And so obviously if your sidewalk is not cleared at this point, you're definitely in violation and face a fine. And so obviously the county will be out enforcing that over the next several days as that 24-hour period after the snowfall had stopped has passed. But it's very important that we do get those cleared so the kids who walk to school or walk to the school buses have a safe, clear route. Obviously, as we get, as those snowpack gets harder on the sidewalks, it gets harder to shovel, number one, but it also becomes more slippery and dangerous for anyone traveling on them. And so obviously that's an important consideration in this whole process with schools as well. So please do your civic responsibility and frankly, the requirement under county code to get your sidewalks cleared.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Members of the media, any more questions this afternoon? Going once, twice? Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you all. Take care.